In this video, we'll try out function calling and building tools specifically for AI agents. The SDK that we'll use is OpenAI's new Agents SDK. And I've seen some code examples of creating like functions or tools for agents, but more like dummy functions, for example, multiplication or getting weather, but returning like a hard-coded value. So let's try something a little bit more practical and build a project manager assistant agent. So the way agent would work is it will get a user input, which is a question about a project or a task. Agent will process the request. Then we're going to build these tools that agent will have access to. These tools entail calling an API. The API that we'll use is Asana's API. If you haven't used Asana, it's a really great task management software and a lot of companies out there use it. And Asana also has an API and different kinds of endpoints where you can get information about the tasks, project, users, so on. So AI agent has access to these tools, then it would decide which function is best to call. It would execute that function, and API response is usually in a string format that could be converted into a JSON, so it's not formatted for like a human readable response, which is what also AI agent is going to convert to and return a reply. For example, what's the status, or what's the update? Can you give me an update on this task, which is, I'm sure, is a question that a lot of us that are working in a company might get. So let's try it out. Just a quick look at Asana before we start writing the code. So yeah, it's like the tasks here divided into different sections. You can have board, there's a list and timeline option. And I created this task and then I can move it out between the boards. And this is what I have in terms of agent. For this specific set of tools, we're going to create a new agent, but we can still go over, it will be the same method as I created before. And if you're interested in this one, I built it in my last video, so you can check that one out as well. But yeah, the process would be the same. We load environment variables, so I have my OpenAI API key stored in a .env file. So the name of the variable is, as you can see here, OpenAI key, and then the value of the key itself. We create an OpenAI and we use agent from the agents SDK that is installed here by running this, and we give it a name, we give instructions, model, and then another input here would be the tools. So every agent has its own task assigned, and finally we run that. And this is, I was analyzing a file from here, the transcript, but we won't be needing this part, so I'm just gonna delete this cell. All right, so I will create a new agent. This would be query agent. And let's give it a task Asana query. Instructions would be, you are a helpful. So this is not where the request goes. This is just like, think of instructions as like a system prompt, right? So it knows what a task is. So you're a helpful assistant that can answer questions about project and tasks. So the model would be the same, GPT 4.0. And before we actually integrate Asana, we can actually try a simple example to make sure that it works. So this would be from the examples on OpenAI. I think it's on their repository, one of their repositories. And here, this is how function tool is created. So function definition, any inputs that we are giving it, and then returning the type. So in the previously, if you have used function calling, you would have known that you would have to define the schema. This is what the schema would look like, where you have type, name, you give it a description and all the parameters in this format. But the good thing about this one, and then the way of passing it to the agents, if you define like the type of the function, AI agent can actually read this type, so you don't need to write all this, which is also same also get weather function. It's way simpler. So let's copy this. We would have to first, we'll make sure that you run this to install the packages, and in the imports that we have the function calls. And then I think we need also this one, and I'm gonna add this in a new line. For the class definition, let's also import this. All right, and we can try out this weather, and we can run this by calling runner.run, passing the agent name. That would be query agent, and instead of user input being like what I have here, what's the status? Let's just first ask about the weather because it doesn't actually have the tool yet. Might still get confused because it has a system, can answer questions about weather. Change that, and then we add here tools. We pass it array because it could be more than one tool, and then weather. All right, we can run it now. Control enter to provide the specify which city. Okay, so see, it was able to see that this get weather takes in city as an argument and doesn't have that. So I'll say okay, so now we have the city. We can see in the debug that the get weather was called, and yeah, it returns whatever the value was indicated here. So function calling is working. Let's just integrate Asana now to access Asana's API. We need to create an API key. So I'm going to go to the settings, apps, developer console, and create a new token. Right, I'm going to check this, create token. I'll copy that. Let's call this Asana access token. Pasted. So make sure that to keep this access token safe. Otherwise, if it's leaked, then, and I'm gonna rotate right after this, then they have access to your information and then your API, and that env file shouldn't be pushed to GitHub. Okay, so I'll close this out. All right, now let's create a function that calls Asana API and add that function in the tools. We first need to install Asana package. So I'm gonna add another code snippet here, run separately pip install is just Asana. All right, once that is installed, we have to import it here at the top. First, I'm gonna import Asana, and then from Asana REST, I'll import API exception type. So Asana has like a lot of different APIs, API endpoints, and we're gonna start with the one that fetches the tasks. So function tool, define get tasks. The return type, we're gonna make that any, and I think for that we have to also import from typing import any. What I've noticed that if let's say you type this in a wrong way, because first we don't know what exactly this returns, then you're gonna get, and you try to use function tool with the agent, and agent won't be able to get a response. Okay, so now let's access the API key that we saved in our environment, and this would be os.get environment. It's called Asana. Make sure I spell correctly. Access token. Then we set configuration that equals to Asana that configuration. So this will just like create a configuration object, and then we set our API key. So they call it access token actually, and that equals to our API key. Okay, let's create a client. API client equals to Asana dot API client, and we pass in the configuration object in here. All right, so the next step is we need to get the project ID. So the way usually you can get it once you're in the project board, it would be this URL like after the last dash. So it task API. So then they have different APIs like categories, for example, users, projects, and then the one we're interested in is tasks. So that would be Asana.task tasks API. So we're gonna pass in the client. And then we set the project ID that equals to the value that I just pasted in here. So we have options on what kind of, like in terms of request, what kind of data we want returned, which field, and also how many items. So we can set like limit, for example, if you're creating pagination of having 50 items, and then the field is called option, just fields. I'm gonna jump over real quick to the documentation and see what are the fields that are available. So I'm gonna copy this whole thing, but we don't have all the fields, so I'm not gonna include all of them. Let's see, we don't have any custom fields, so up until created by this ones we can have. We don't need any of this. Let's close this out. And what I'm gonna add, so we have actual times, approval status, assignee, so on, whether or not it's completed. What I will add is name, do on. There's also a notes section when you're creating a task. So in here I can add, I believe this one is the description. So function calling, implement functions that could be passed as tools to AI agents. All right. So that'll be the description. All right, now we're done with the options and try to make a API call. So I'll start with a try request. So we have to loop through the items, and it's also using this print package to do the print compared to like traditional print. Let's paste this, but what we're gonna change is I think the indentations of, okay, it's task API instance. We do have that. Let's create task names, for example, like an empty array indentation. So tasks API instance, I'm going to fix the typo here. So we're getting the tasks from here. So let's create tasks list equals convert the API response to list. So we can go through it, and I'm gonna remove this. So also we're gonna create task names like a new array. So for loop in enumerate. Let's do if is instance. Do a quick type check task. And task has a field name, then we're gonna do task names and append name. Else, let's just print no name found. So let's return this in a string, JSON formatted string. So I'm going to import JSON. And here we call JSON dumps task names. We can also indicate indent, which would be 2. All right, after that we have exception, and that should be all. Before we update and give this to AI agent, we can just test it out, like call this function here, although it won't print the result. So I'm just gonna say tasks equal to get tasks, and then print tasks. Oh, object is not callable. Okay. Let's comment this out before we test it, and then I need to run this to make sure this got updated. And well, for now, it still returns the weather. OS, oh, get environment. Okay, let's fix that. So it seems like there's a mismatch in terms of the arguments, and since the last time I tried this, get tasks was able to take the project ID, but if we want to get tasks of all projects, we might want to use this API endpoint. So then the function would be get task for project, and this is the function that takes in two arguments, project ID and options. So let's do that. So replace get task with get task for project. I'm gonna run this. If I run this as well, we're gonna see the list here. Okay. Let's update the function here. Your helpful assistant that can answer questions about tasks. And the user input, which this you can turn into input box, would be list all tasks. Then I have to uncomment the function tool. All right, while this is running, I'm just gonna remove this cell because now it's a function tool, so it's not gonna work. Okay, so here are all the tasks available in the project. Yay, our Asana agent can answer the question. So now just let's, instead of having a name only, let's save all the fields. And yeah, I'll just do like a task. So now it can give us the more details. So let's see if it can answer the question about like, where are we at? Asana API. All right, so it just pulled up. It's currently open and has not yet been completed. Gives us more detail. Honestly, I would personally love to use that. I know this agent would be helpful for a lot of project managers or customer service answering questions. So yeah, this is the practical example that I wanted to give for function calling. We're calling an API. We're giving that to creating an AI agent. And that is like our current workflow. There's like a lot of things that could be done. You can create more agents, and you can also follow along the rest of the endpoints. So you can actually give tools to the agent so that it can also update tasks. This would be it for the tutorial. I'm also looking into making one about MCP or continuing with building a UI for this one. So let me know in the comments which one it is you prefer to see next, and I'll see you soon.